Good evening, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, you are very welcome to this Zoom talk this evening by Richard Stedall.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to be your speaker this evening. Yes, I'm the coordinator of the Malta Bus Archive project. This sits within the wider Memoria project, the oral, sound and visual archive of the National Archives of Malta. We've got a new website that launched a couple of months ago covering the Memoria project. And what we'll do is, once I've finished the formal part of my talk, and we've had the questions and bits and pieces, I'm willing to, for sort of 10 or 15 minutes, take those of you who want to find out a little bit more about this new and quite useful website. I'll just sort of take you through the starting basics, just enough so that you can then kind of sort of explore the website at your own leisure. But that will come after the talk. So the Malta Bus Archive, it's the official archive of all things to do with the bus industry here in Malta, from the arrival of the very first motor bus in December 1904 up to what is happening today. As I always say to people, today's events are tomorrow's history. And in fact, actually today, the local bus operator, MPT, took delivery of their first two battery electric operated buses. They were driven from the docks to the main bus depot around about lunchtime today. So, you know, literally what is happening today, you know, will go down as a footnote in history. So before we sort of properly get going, I just thought we'd have a very quick look at Malta's very first buses. Malta's first buses were down to the fine business partnership of our friends who have appeared in at least one talk before, Edward Tancred Ajus and Major Joseph Muscat, who were brothers-in-law. They arranged for the very first bus to come. This is the demonstrator built by Thornycroft in the UK. It arrived in December 1904. And this is an auto-coloured image that's the original black and white was taken by Richard Ellis, the famous, well-known photographer who late 19th century, early 20th century, took thousands and thousands of very high quality images on glass plate negatives. And the good news is the fact that the vast majority of those glass plate negatives are still held by the family, and they are absolutely superb quality photos. And I found some online software that will have a go at trying to sort of colour images. It's good at doing people, it's good at doing vegetation. The rest of it's a little bit hit and miss. So the very first bus fleet, there were 6 vehicles, all also built by Thornycroft. They entered use in October 1905, but didn't last long, with the operation ceasing around about December 1906. This was one of several photographs that were taken just before the start of operations. We think it was around about sort of late September 1905, and shows quite a few of the staff posed with one of the open-top double-deck buses. There were 6 vehicles altogether. You can see them numbered 1 to 6 there. They didn't carry registration plates because registration plates didn't arrive in Malta until around about 1908. But you can see that there were 4 open-top double-deckers. Single decker number 1 on the far left-hand side is, we think, the chassis of the demonstrator fitted with a new kind of sort of more standard bus body. And then number 6 on the far right-hand side was a lorry, and that was very quickly converted into a basic single-deck bus as well. I said that the glass plate negatives were super quality. when I originally had these copies made from the glass plate negatives, we only had one camera lens with us that day. So what I actually did was used a handheld magnifying glass and the phone on my camera, the camera on my phone, to try and sort of get a enlargement of one of the vehicles. And you can see on the left-hand image there, the fact that, there's still a lot of very sharp detail. You can clearly see the faces of two of the members of staff. And if you actually kind of look at the kind of even further zoom I did, okay, it's pixelated a lot, but you can just make out on a white plate the letter A and the number 48. These sorts of plates were normally found on the rear of horse-drawn cabs, horse-drawn carts, that sort of thing. The A was for Police Division A, which covered Valletta, because although the depot was in Zira, the offices for the ETA company were in Valletta, and the number 48's the serial number for that plate. So anyway, that sort of just gives you a very quick view of the very early buses. But what I'm going to do is the main part of my talk, I'm calling jigsaw theory. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of show you how, using various documentary sources here on the island and things, I've been able to put together a lot of the information I've got. But I'll also show how the fact that these sorts of sources of information can also be used for your own research, be that research into family, research into a particular village or area of the islands. Yes, as we go along, I'll sort of introduce you to these different sources. So, jigsaw theory, basically what it is the fact that it bringing together all the elements of Malta's bus history is really like trying to do a jigsaw puzzle, where actually you've got pieces from probably at least 3 different puzzles. They've all been mixed together, and you don't know what any of the pictures on the boxes are. All you can do is slowly try and piece things together. So each piece of information, each photograph, each document, on its own, may at first glance seem to be a bit insignificant. But once you start putting things together, individual facts merge and the overall picture starts to become a lot clearer, just like doing a jigsaw. So let's take you through a kind of sort of working example. Let's start with this rather grand photograph that I was sent not long after I started this project just over 4 years ago. So what can we see in the photograph? Well, we've obviously got this old bus, we've got some people, but, it raises a lot of questions. What make is the bus? What number is it? Who are these people? Because a lot of the work that I do, yes, it's recording the history of the vehicles, but the vehicles are only really one half of the bus industry. The people, the owners, the drivers, the conductors, the bus builders, even the passengers, they very much make up the other half of the industry. What year was the photograph taken? So, looking at the photograph itself, what in the way of initial clues can we get? Well, it mentions down the side of it the Modern Motor Company. It also mentions Moster, albeit spelt the old pre-World War II way of muster. The front axle spokes and the design of the radiator are fairly unique. It's certainly sort of World War I and in the 1920s, each make of chassis had its own distinct radiator, had its own distinct pattern of spokes and things on the front and rear axles. So let's have a little look. Had I got any mention of the Modern Motor Company in my records? The answer was no, although I had got mention of a modern garage in Sleema. However, that has nothing to do with this this modern motor company in Mosta. The thick spokes suggest the fact that probably it's built on a former World War I lorry chassis rather than an extended car chassis. The car chassis tended to be used a lot for ambulances during the First World War, and a lot of early buses here in Malta were built on the chassis of those ambulances. But those chassis tended to have lots of very thin spokes, almost like a bicycle wheel, whereas lorry chassis tended to have far fewer spokes, but they were much thicker, sturdier ones. The square radiator with the rounded chrome top and the rectangle in the middle, again, was a fairly kind of sort of unique design and would prove very useful in trying to identify the make of the vehicle. So I sent the photograph to a good friend of mine, Terry Partridge in Exeter, who's good at identifying old makes of vehicle from the radiator and axle. And after a few hours, he came back to me with an answer. It's a Napier World War I military lorry chassis. And the photograph on the left gives you an idea of what it would have probably looked like during the First World War when it was in use as a lorry. If you look, the front axle spokes match, the design of the radiator and the grille and everything all matches, although the wartime lorry one has had been painted overall sort of dark colour, probably dark green, and therefore that's why it looks just a little bit different to the bus. Now, the name Napier rang a bell. I'd come across it going through some old vehicle files at Transport Malta. Now, during the early years of the Second World War, and especially sort of late 1941 into early 1942, there was an absolutely huge shortage of serviceable basic trucks and vans that could be used, especially by the military. And it just so happened that there were a number of old stored buses knocking around that could be used. One had formerly been number 145 and the other had been number 207. Since then, I actually found another photograph. This one shows Napier bus 406, around about 1930, being used by the British Motor Company as their Valletta terminus office. But the actual buses that were used, you can see the queue of second generation Thornycrofts queuing up behind. These were much bigger and much higher quality buses than most of the Maltese built ones that were around. So the number 145, now that rang a bell as well. And looking through my research notes, I found that the bus that replaced the Napier, which was a Chevrolet, was recorded as operating between Mosta and Valletta in 1929. And of course, the photograph of the Napier mentions that the operator was based in Mosta. So, you know, click, click, a couple of little sort of jigsaw pieces starting to fit together. And I'm convinced that if you kind of sort of squint and half close an eye and look at where the registration plate should be, I think you can just see a number 5, which means I'm reasonably certain that what we've got is a picture of Napier bus number 145. So let's now sort of look at what else we can do to add some more meat to the bones. The National Archives of Malta is based in the old Sancta Spiritu Hospital in Rabat. And amongst the documents it holds are the police commissioners' occurrence books for most areas. Not quite all yet. A few of the police divisions are still held by the police, but they're in the process of being handed over. So there were 10 police divisions altogether, and these are the division numbers with the places that fitted into each division. And these volumes include references to all sorts of incidences, including traffic incidences and therefore buses. Now, a lot of the incidents that are mentioned are for breaches of the rules, which by today's standards are really very minor, and some would even say quite petty. So, for example, failure to wear their badge correctly. Both drivers and conductors were required to wear an officially numbered badge, initially somewhere prominent on their breast, on their jacket, but in the 1930s that was changed, and they had to wear it basically on the middle of the front of their official cap instead. Other things that they could get their wrists slapped for were including picking up and setting down passengers at unauthorised places, carrying too many passengers, partly because if there were too many passengers, especially in the back of the bus, it could mean that the wheels at the front would start to lose traction because the weight was too unbalanced. No lights at night, especially at the rear, and especially before they started to get things like electric lights, and they were things like sort of paraffin lanterns and that sort of thing. You know, sometimes the lantern would go out or wasn't lit properly or whatever. Accidents involving other vehicles, people or animals. It's amazing, especially in the first half of the 1920s, just how many animals were roaming around in the streets, including stray dogs, flocks of goats, and obviously a lot of horse and donkey drawn vehicles, carts and cabs and all that sort of thing. There were also incidences of unlicensed drivers or conductors, including sometimes the conductor acting as the driver, even though they weren't licensed to do so. The conductor either sitting or standing on the step of the bus whilst it was in motion was a bit of a no-no. Working a route they weren't licensed to run on. You know, as I say, a whole host of these sorts of incidents. And luckily for me, because the vehicle records don't go back beyond early to mid 1930s, and there aren't really many other documentary sources. These police occurrence books have been an absolute goldmine in trying to put together mentions of bus numbers, names of drivers, and things like that. And I now have a spreadsheet with over 13,000 entries in it, primarily covering the period 1920 to around about 1932-33. Although there are a few, luckily a few mentions from the 1905-1906 operation as well. So let's just have a quick look at a sample entry here. This was an entry I'd found that mentioned bus 145, dated the 1st of April 1924, and it confirmed that the name of the driver was Angelo Scicluna, and that he did indeed live in Mostar. So again, that seemed to kind of sort of help tie things in with that photograph. If we look at the other side of the page, he was charged with being the owner of the bus and having failed to display in a frame in a conspicuous part of the bus the vehicle's license. Basically, the vehicles would have had a square license document. This needed to be displayed within the bus so that the police or any passengers could check to see that the vehicle was indeed legally licensed to be on the road. And as you'll see in the far right-hand corner, he was fined 2 shillings and 6pence for his crime, as it were. So looking through further police occurrence book references for bus 145, the earliest mention I've been able to find is the summer of 1922, and it appears to have remained in use until at least the summer of 1927. Angelo Scicluna was the person most often listed as the driver, but there was also an entry for an Andrea Scicluna, driving the bus in May 1926. Now, if we take a look, the name of the father is often mentioned in these entries. And again, that's an absolute godsend, because this shows that the name of the father for Andrea was the same as the father for Angelo, confirming the fact that they were brothers. And if we compared the ages, Andrea is the younger brother of Angelo. You'll also see the fact that Andrea's badge number and his special driving license number were also mentioned. And again, in my spreadsheet, I've been logging these facts with the hope that if old bus driving badges appear, eventually what I want to be able to do is, be able to sort of say, oh, well, that number badge used to belong to this particular person, and that sort of thing. Again, all those sorts of records were once held by the police, but sadly have not survived to the current day. So what else could I find out about Angelo and Andrea? Angelo's listed as driving 4 different buses between 1924 and 1930, including the fact the latter one from about 1928, showing that by then he'd moved from Mostar to Lear. Apparently, when he got married, his wife was from the village of Lear, so he moved from Mostar to there. Andrea's first mention is that from 1926, but again, he's also listed driving a couple of different buses, at least through to 1930. Now, another useful source of documents held at the National Archives are the passport applications. Now, from around about 1915, these normally include a copy of the photograph that was submitted with the application. So what they would do is they'd submit 2 copies of the photograph. One would stay attached to the application, one would go on the actual passport document. And this means the fact that, if we can find passports for some of these people, we can actually start to put faces to names. And if we have a look at the photographs that we see here, so you've got the original gentleman who was stood next to the bus in the mystery photograph, and I found 2 passports for Angelo, one when he was still a teenager, one when he was a slightly older man. And I think we can fairly safely say, looking at the picture of the gentleman next to the bus, this is definitely Angelo, aged basically about halfway between the 2 passport images. There's actually a search engine on the Archives Portal Europe website, which means you can search for passports up to and including 1939 currently. And if you do that, you'll see a low resolution PDF copy of the passport, whereas what we've got here is an actual high resolution photograph of the original document. So if we look at the document that we've got here, we can see it's for Angelo Scicluna. Often they then have added to it the name of the father. And again, here we see Matthew, so the anglicised version of Matteo. We can see that he's living in Lear, which again connects nicely with what we'd found in the police occurrence books, that he was born in Mostar, in this particular case, the 28th of February, 1899, that he was a motor driver. Now, when it comes to listing the professions on these documents, on the whole, what they tend to do is just have a fairly standardised list. So motor driver covered anybody who wanted to put their profession down as being someone who drove a car, a bus, a truck, a bike, anything like that. So yes, he's listed as a motor driver. and it says that he was off to Catania in Sicily to undergo a medical procedure. You can also sort of see on the right-hand side additional information about him, saying the fact that he was married, he was 5'8" tall, and he had hazel eyes, and his hair was starting to turn grey. So you can imagine the fact that if you were actually doing some research on members of your own family, these passport applications can be sort of really quite powerful documents, especially if maybe you've got photographs of individuals later in life, but you've not got any photographs of them maybe as younger men and younger women. These documents often can provide, as I say, a lot of very interesting background on the people concerned. So there's actually another connection between the Scicluna family, Mosta, and the bus industry. There's a gentleman, or there was a gentleman called Joseph Scicluna, who for much of his life was known as Tarreo. And that's because he was the importing agent for Rayo lorry and bus chassis in the 1930s. Now, the business he set up, Scicluna Enterprises, also supplied parts and lubricants and that sort of thing for vehicles. And that business is still trading to this day, not too far away from the centre of Mosta. Sadly, Joseph Scicluna himself passed away a number of years ago, around about the 1980s. So the question that then came to my mind was, well, was Joseph related to Angelo and Andrea? So a further search of the passport applications found applications from Joseph dated 1920 and 1937. And if we look at this 1937 application, it confirms his father was also Matthew, that he was born in Mosta in 1897. So that made him the oldest of the three brothers, Joseph, Angelo, and Andrea. He's listed as a merchant, in brackets, agent, which ties in nicely with his Rayo dealership role. And there's the two photographs, the 1937 photograph at the top and the 1920 photograph on the right. Finally, it's amazing what comes to light simply by getting out there and talking to people who've either worked in the industry themselves or are related to or otherwise knew those who are no longer with us. This particular lovely photograph of a Rayo bus on the right-hand side, and a number of people stood on a temporary box body, sat on a brand new Rayo chassis, came to me via a member of staff at the National Archives. Now, her mother's aunt was married to Joseph Scicluna's cousin, Francesco Scicluna, who, as well as being listed as a merchant as well, was also involved with the Rayo side of the business. So the photograph dates from the mid-1930s, and as I say, shows a Rayo chassis with bus 1754. Now that was new in the latter half of 1933, and there's a very good chance that that photograph was probably taken around about the time that that bus was new. The gentleman in white with the flat cap and the jacket is believed to be Francesco Scicluna, and this is his passport application photograph. And that person in the flat cap and the tie stood on the beside the bus, we think is probably Joseph Scicluna. Who a lot of the other people are on the vehicle, sadly at the moment we don't know. There's a bus expert who lives in Lear, quite elderly gentleman these days, called Joe Kataya, and he remembers as a youngster seeing Angelo Scicluna in Lear as a much older man. By then, Angelo wasn't involved with buses, but I believe Joe said the fact that he spent a while driving ambulances after his involvement with the buses. This is the bus that 1990 that was owned by Angelo's father-in-law at the time, Carmelo Sherry. It's a Chevrolet, and as you can see, it was named Diamond Star, and there are a number of mentions of Angelo driving that vehicle between 1928 and 1930. By the end of 1931, the bus had been sold on, and so far there were no later mentions of Angelo being involved with the bus industry. The 1937 passport application does say he was still a motor driver, but that would tie in with Joe Katai's recollection that he was maybe driving ambulances and things by then. So just to sort of tie up this part of the talk, a quick summary of the sources of information that have each generated jigsaw pieces of information. So the study of old photographs, it's amazing what can be sort of ascertained just looking at an old photograph for clues. There are the old vehicle files which are held by Transport Malta. These aren't open to the public at the moment, but I've been given permission over a number of years to go through all of them, noting as much as I can in the way of details about the vehicles, and up until the early 1970s currently, details about the owners as well. But there's a 50-year closure period on personal data, so at the moment I can't go any further forward from about 1971-72 at the moment. There are the police commissioners' occurrence books, and as I said, especially if you're kind of sort of researching the history of maybe a particular village or a particular area of the island, these are an absolute treasure trove of information. Just going kind of sort of just casually reading through, looking at the sorts of incidents that were being reported. Early 1920s, there were an awful lot of horse-drawn vehicles being mentioned and not much motor transport. By the beginning of the 1930s, increasing number of motor vehicles, especially buses, being mentioned, and relatively little in the way of horse-drawn vehicles. But you also get incidents such as, I think it was mid-1920s, in the eastern area of the island around sort of Zaytun and things, there was obviously a big problem with rats, and the local inhabitants were encouraged to hand in dead rats, and I believe they were being given a penny for each rat they handed in, and there were then lists, pages and pages of, this particular person handed in 3 rats, this person handed in 1 rat, and so on. But it was obviously certainly a way of helping to keep vermin numbers under control. There are the passport applications, and as I say, I would suggest, if you've got any Maltese relatives, having a look at the, as I say, the Europe portal. And again, at the end of the talk, there will be a list of websites and things, and I've put the website address on there for that. You just type in the name, and up will come a whole list of passports. But as I say, if you're looking for photographs, you need to be looking at passports newer than 1915, 1916, that sort of thing. So there are the recollections of the various known individuals. We've been doing some videoed and recorded interviews with retired bus drivers and bus owners, and it's amazing the detail and information that comes out of those. The sorts of personal stories that just aren't recorded in the official documents. And just to sort of finish off, when it comes to answering the 4 key questions about the photograph, what was the make of the bus? Well, it's a Napier. What number is it? Almost certainly number 145. Who are the people? Well, it looks as though it's Angelo Scicluna. Towards the rear, it's either his father Matteo, or it could actually be Matteo's cousin Francesco as a younger man. We're still not quite sure about that. And we're not quite sure who the small boy is. If it's Francesco, it may be a child of his. And when it comes to when was the photograph taken, early to mid 1920s, probably around about 1922-ish, when the bus was probably brand new. One source of information that hasn't been consulted in this particular example are copies of old newspapers. Now, the Times of Malta have got online an archive going back to 1930. You do need to subscribe to get access to it, but again, it's an absolute goldmine of information. And then the National Library in Valletta has on microfiche copies of a number of other English language and Maltese language newspapers that are available for consultation. So the final kind of sort of briefer part of this presentation, I'm calling the return of cultural treasures. Now, as was mentioned, up until 1973, buses were all in different liveries, depending on which route or groups of routes the vehicles were being used on. So here we can see the white and blue livery of the Maliha route, the two-tone brown of the Mosta and Nashar route, the light green of the Cospicua group of routes, the orange of the Zuri group of routes, the yellow of the Zebuj route, and again another light green one of Cospicua with a nice view over the three cities in that mid-1960s shot. Final couple, the red and white of the Leah route, and then the dark blue that came here to Rabat. So, you know, you had all these beautifully colourful old buses up until 1973. And then in 1973, everything was merged into just three groups. And then very quickly after that, in 1975, into a single operating group. And all the buses ended up in that light green livery that you can see there. Although over the years, the shade of green did tend to sort of change and morph a little bit and got a little bit darker and a slightly sort of richer shade. And then in 1995, everything changed again. And that's when the yellow with an orange band livery came into play. And that's what was used right up until 2011 when Arriva took over. Now, as I say, Arriva took over in 2011, and I think everybody at the time thought, well, that's it, we'll never see classic Maltese buses out on the road again. But luckily, there's a couple more old buses there. Luckily, in 2018, the Malta Bus Co-op was set up. Now, this is a group of around about 15 bus owners who have had a number of classic buses that they still owned, completely restored and repainted into old liveries. Here we see two of them, one in the dark blue of Rabat and one in the two-tone green Slima livery. What they have had to have fitted are sort of electric plug doors, just from a safety point of view. But you'll see on the green bus that this has been done in such a way that it actually completely kind of sort of mirrors the mouldings on the side of the bus, so that it kind of almost just sort of slots into the side of the bodywork. You'd hardly know that there was actually a door there. Here we see another couple of their restored buses. Thank goodness for the large, impressive fronts to many of Malta's churches, because they really do provide very nice backgrounds when trying to take artistic photographs of old buses. The vehicle on the right, the red one's actually a rather interesting vehicle. You may recall in 2012 when the Olympic parade was making its way around the UK, there were actually two old Maltese buses that were used in the parade. One had the rear cut away and was actually used in the torch parade, and then the other one had slightly less work done to it and was kind of used as a backup vehicle and was used at locations to help, sort of promote the events and things. This is the latter of those vehicles, and it's been brought back to Malta, completely restored back to how it would have looked pre-1973 in the Burka livery, and that's it sat in the front of the parish church at Emjar. A couple more of their vehicles, one in the Maliha livery. A lot of work they do include weddings. You can see a wedding party in the background there at a chapel just on the outskirts of Rendy. And then the vehicle on the right, showing off the glorious kind of sort of curved rear ends that a lot of these buses had. There was an event being held in Dingley, school children sort of coming in playing football in a multi-team tournament, and in between their games there were a couple of these buses and they were doing kind of sort of quick trip up onto Dingley Cliffs and back again. And the road up at Dingley Cliffs is about the only place on the island I know of these days where you can still find a herd of goats and sheep taking themselves for a walk along the road. And lo and behold, as we went along the road, I was kind of sort of sat right in the front of the second bus behind the green one, and we came across this scene, and you can kind of sort of see the kids on the left-hand side haven't seen the animals, and they're all just kind of sort of leaning out the windows and being silly. You can see the kids on the right-hand side with all their noses up against the windows, looking at the sheep and goats. And eventually they got out of the road so that we could continue our way along the road. And then about just over a year ago, another group of owners set up the Vintage Bus City Tour. Now, their fleet all are what are known as normal control vehicles. In other words, the engine is sticking out the front of the bus, whereas the other group, the engine is in the bus next to the driver, so you end up with a much flatter front, and that's known as forward control. But as you can see here, they've got initially a fleet of 6 buses, 2 with Bedford fronts, although in true Maltese style. The chassis are actually much older, they're not Bedfords. And then the 4 vehicles you can see in the middle are all early 1950s Fords and Thames. And as is standard with all Maltese buses, the bodyworks were all built by craftsmen here on the island. You can see quite a nice selection of liveries and bits and pieces they carry there. These are used on a couple of hop-on, hop-off tours. One runs 7 days a week, St Julian's and Sleamer. One runs on Sundays down to the big Sunday market at Marsha Schlock. And as you can see, quite popular with the tourists when we've actually got tourists here. Obviously, during the last year, there have been periods where we've had absolutely no tourists. This winter just gone, we've not had many, but in the last week or two, the numbers are now at least starting to climb again, which is a good sign. And there we see another couple of the restored vehicles. The yellow and orange one, number 537 on the right-hand side, that was the very last Thames in normal service, and that was still in service up until July 2011. And the fleet is increasing. This is a late 1940s comma. It was used for a number of years by the Grech family of Moster, who ran Paramount Garage. It was replaced around about 1984-85. And on the left, you can see a picture of it taken almost 20 years later, preserved in the back of the Paramount garage. It's since been completely stripped down to the frames, as seen in the middle image. And then the image on the right was taken about 3 weeks ago and shows that it's been restored back into the old Nashar livery that it was new in. And by hopefully Easter, maybe a week after Easter, that should be completely finished and then out on the road doing the vintage bus tours as well. And there's a number of other vehicles currently having work done to them that will hopefully mean that the fleet will continue to expand as well. So finally, I promised that there was be a list of contact details on the websites. So if you want to contact me about anything to do with Malta buses, maltabusarchive@gmail.com. The Malta Bus Archive's also got a Facebook page and a YouTube channel. And if on either of those two platforms, you just type in Malta Bus Archive, that will take you to the relevant page. If you want to contact the National Archives of Malta, the general email address is shown there, customercare.archives@gov.mt. There's the general National Archives website, and there's also the new Memoria website, which, as I say, I will take you through. Those who want to see it, I shall take you through after this talk. And finally, there's the Archives Portal Europe website, which is the one if you want to have a look to see passport applications up to 1939. Anything from 1939 up to 1952 is open for public access, but at the moment those registers haven't been digitized. So what you would need to do is contact the National Archives with the name of the person, the year you think they emigrated. They can then look to see if there is a passport application, and if so, can copy it for you. Anything newer than 1952 at the moment is closed to the public because there's a 70-year closure period on that. And so that finishes the main part of this evening's presentation. I've kind of sort of skipped through that rather quickly. Apologies if it was maybe a little bit too quick. But if I'd been going through things in detail, we literally would have still been here at Christmas. I've uncovered so much information, so many stories and things that, yeah, you know, I could give an hour's talk each week, and yeah, you know, we'd still be here at the end of the year. So there's a lot that I could have talked about, and I'm happy to come back and talk about other specific topics to do with the bus industry at a later date if you wish me to. Otherwise, I will pause there so we can have any questions. And then, as I say, anybody that wants to hang on for further 10-15 minutes, I will take you through how to use the Memoria website.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. That was most interesting. And it's brought back many happy memories of my travels around the island in the buses. So,
Peter Bartolo.
Yes, hi.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Now, I have been wondering about this. When my brother and I were quite young, and I came from Slema, just 100 meters, 100 yards up the road, was a garage that built private buses. Now, one of the things that always always marveled at, was the fact that these buses were built again on truck chassis, as has been pointed out, but that they were built very much to order. Now, do you have any plans, you know, copies of what in fact went into building these buses? I mean, it was a marvelous sight just seeing a bus sort of developing over, say, 3-4 months, you know, laying down the basic ironwork and things like that, and the rest, you know. Are there any records of these plans?
Sadly, most of the actual bodybuilders are no longer with us. I've been able to make contact with a few sort of sons or grandsons of some of the individuals. And what has surprised me is that very few of these bus builders actually laid out formal plans and diagrams and documents and things for the building of these vehicles. We've come across one or two. And I was around about sort of November time, I went to one workshop just at the foot of the hill going up to Rabat, where the Gauci family had built buses in the 50s and 60s. Now, Manuel Gauci is no longer with us. One of his sons, Joseph, who's now, I think in his late 70s, early 80s, and he's now retired as well. And it's his son running the garage. But they took me to the garage, and there were a few cards and wooden templates just for sort of certain shapes and certain parts of that. But what was interesting in their workshop is the fact that some of the original machinery that was used for cutting the wood, cutting the metal, and all that sort of thing was still in the workshop. And in one case, I think one of the power saws was said to be about 100 years old. So it's amazing that this machinery was still there. But yeah, very, very few sort of bits and sort of diagrams or scale drawings or anything have come to light. And that's partly because they kind of sort of just knew what they were doing. A lot of them had started as trained carpenters. One had started off as an apprentice with a wooden cart builder and had learned how to build wooden wheels and sides of carts and that sort of thing. And from there, kind of sort of went into building the frames of buses and things. So, but that's one area I'm still very much trying to make contact with some of the families, some of the descendants of these individuals. There's still quite a few that I need to try and sort of get hold of to see what in the way of photographs or documentation may still exist with the families.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
David, you're muted.
Oh, yes. Okay. William Griffiths has a question. William, you'll have to unmute.
Yep.
And then after William, I suggest, Graham, that we go to the Memoria project short presentation by Richard, because that will answer some questions as well.
Okay.
Okay, William?
Yeah, it's a question from Lucy.
Lucy.
Just asking if there's any attempt to recreate the very distinctive and individual interior decoration that was such a special part of Maltese buses.
Yes. Sadly, let me just bear with me. Let me see if I can find a picture of one of the interiors that's just been. Right, bear with me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a photograph on my Facebook that I took of one of the interiors a couple of weeks ago. And I will then share that onto the screen. So just give me a couple of moments to find it.
David, while he's doing that, can I make a humorous comment? Peter Brinsden here again.
Oh, yes, Peter. Yep, far away, Peter.
I'm absolutely staggered to see the quality of the road to Dingley now. It's all smooth tarmac. In the 70s, it was full of potholes. And as an obstetrician, gynecologist as I was at Umtarfa, I took my wife along the road in Dingley deliberately up and down like this to try and get her going. And it worked. And now it's all smooth, smooth tarmac.
Yeah.
What hope is there for women who are overdue?
Yes, the road through Dingley Village, and especially the road up along the cliff tops at Dingley Cliffs is all now lovely and smooth, and
For
footpaths
tourists,
up there and everything. So anyway,
But-
look, let me just quickly
But
share
but
this.
don't you worry, Peter. There are still a few potholes around.
Yay.
Right, let me just quickly share this image, hopefully. So hopefully you can now see, this is the interior cab area of one of the Thames buses, the red one with the blue band, the old Zabar livery. And as you can see, the quality of the finish inside is amazing. The only thing that's kind of sort of not original is the CD player and speaker on the right hand side, and that's just so the fact that if they're used on tour work, there is the option of either doing a live commentary or playing a commentary on a CD. But yes, you know, that's hopefully brings back some memories of just how brightly the interiors of the buses could be.
And Richard, on another additional feature on the interiors, not shown on that, is the small shrines. There was a
Yes.
small shrine, usually just behind or alongside the driver's cabin.
That's right. Well, basically, I'm poking my camera through the one half of the glass partition in that kind of sort of cabin barrier that was around the back of the driver's cab. Directly above my head would have been the shrine, and also a nice sort of painted glass piece of artwork. One of the things I'm hoping to do later in the year, if I can get funding for it, is actually a kind of sort of 3-month project looking into the history of artwork inside and outside on the buses. The Tuberfield painting, the lettering that was used, the chrome work, the wood design, and all that sort of thing. So
Thank you.
watch this space. That might well be something that maybe I can give a talk on next year if that project happens.
Thank you. Richard, as time is moving on,
Yes.
could you share the Memoria project now for a few minutes?
Yeah, certainly. Bear with me one moment. And what I need to do is...
May I make one comment while he's setting up
Yes,
for it?
Brian, Byron, yes.
My grandfather was Joseph Muscat, and I used to ride around with the buses with him in the late 40s. And one of his legacies that he was given was a lifetime bus pass. And once he told me that he had an awful job with the passengers when he was setting it up. They were always getting on the wrong buses. And it was no good whatever labels you put on the buses, because most of the passengers were illiterate. So it was his idea to come up with different colored buses for different routes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was the spring of 1931 they started to paint all the buses in those individual colours, and as I say, they lasted up until the autumn of 1973.
Yeah, it's because the people couldn't read.
Yeah.
Just one personal comment to you, Richard. I mentioned earlier on the question of carrying livestock on the buses.
Yes.
Were there any rules and regulations about that?
I have found, when I've been looking in these old police commissioners' books and things, I found some references in the late 20s and early 30s, especially on Gozo. Gozo, and also in the Maliha books, stuff coming up from the ferry pier at Malta. Basically, there'd been a number of occasions where buses were found with livestock or fish or whatever on board. And it was a bit of a grey area as to if it was legal or not. So what the police commissioner turned around and said was, if the buses were not carrying passengers, then pretty much it was up to them. If they wanted to carry, meat, livestock, fish, whatever, as long as they were being, in the case of the meat and the fish, as long as they were being carried in, I think it was zinc-lined boxes and bits and pieces, then that was fine. If the vehicles were carrying passengers, then livestock and produce should not be carried on the vehicles. I do say should not be. That didn't stop some of them having a go. So,
Thank you.
but,
Thank you.
I
anyway,
wonder,
right. Yeah, go.
could I just come in? Could I
And
just come
any
in?
relative of yours?
Yes, just go back to the last issue of Melita. I did put on the front of it an example of some of the decoration within the buses, if you remember, and I can certainly supply that photograph to anybody that wants it.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
For those who may not know, Anne produces the newsletter of Friends of Valletta, and it's called Melita. So if you're on the mailing list of Friends of Valletta, you'll normally receive Melita.
Right.
Richard, over to you.
Okay, right. Hopefully everybody can see the
Not yet.
landing page of the, is it come up?
No, not yet.
No, right. Okay, let me try.
Try sharing screen. It's still got the Malta bus interior.
Right, okay. Let me stop and restart, and hopefully this time it will pick it up. Right.
Oh, yes.
Okay, you can now hopefully see the front page of the memorial website. So I'm just going to skim the surface with this, hopefully just enough so that you can then go and have a look at this at your own leisure. What I am willing to do is later in the year, if you're looking for somebody to fill in another speaking slot, is to maybe come and kind of have a more detailed look through the website, partly because by later in the year there will be a lot more material on it. But the website falls into three main areas: Voices, Showcase, and Citizen Archivist. Voices is where you will find a number of the interviews that have been done. Now, Memoria is actually, it's an amalgamation of an oral history project that had started with the National Archives and the much larger and longer running oral history project that Professor John Kirkhope up at the university had been running. And over the years, he'd got students to go out and interview people on a number of different topics. So what we're starting to do now is upload a number of those interviews. They are primarily just sound interviews. It's only more recently where I've started doing some of the bus interviews that we've been using a video recorder. Now, the other thing you will find is that the vast majority of these interviews are in Maltese. So apologies if you don't speak Maltese, but it's been deemed that, and I've said this all along with the bus ones, it's far more important that the people we are interviewing are at ease and comfortable with what they are telling us. And it doesn't matter how good their English is, they're going to be far more comfortable and relaxed speaking in their native Maltese. Plus, also, we want to sort of try and capture any unique phrases and language that are appropriate to that particular theme. So here you'll see the fact that there's a number of themes. These are the ones that we initially uploaded when we launched the website back in November. And you can see on the far right-hand side that there's one called Transport. And if I click on that, you'll see the fact that we've got 3 interviews uploaded so far: Consiglio Mamo, Charlie Borge, and Frank Tonner. Now, Frank spent many years working in the RAF, including in the UK. His English was absolutely excellent, so he is the only one we've actually, on the bus side, interviewed in English. So it's actually me asking him the questions and bits and pieces. And he is descended from the Tonner brothers from the 20s and 30s, who were all carpenters. And the 2 oldest ones built a few buses before the Second World War. And the 2 youngest ones built buses after the Second World War in Rabat. And Frank's father was one of the 2 older brothers. And he talks a bit about his father and his uncles and the way that they used to build buses. Consiglio Mamo was a bus driver for many years, but never an owner. Charlie Borge was both an owner and a driver of buses. And when you click on these, what you will find is, as well as the actual interview itself, and in the case of the bus ones, there is the audio only version and the video version. I'm not going to play a clip from the videos because streaming over Zoom and things won't work very well. But if you click on related material, you will then also find a number of photographs and other items to do with the interviewee. So if I just sort of click on one of those, you can see on the left here, there's Consiglio Mamo as a younger man alongside his conductor, and a Dodge bus number 3242 on the Zeebrugge route. So that bus would have been in the bright yellow and white livery. So that's kind of sort of the interviews and side of things. And so what I suggest is that you have a good run through that at your own leisure. Bear with me, that's better. So if I now click back on that, if you click on the red shuttered O symbol wherever you see it, that will take you back to the front page. So again, if you look through some of the other themes that are in there, you'll find other interviews. So the showcase section, this is where you'll find collections of photographs, collections of audio recordings of bell ringing, and various other things. And if we click on the Malta Bus Archive link and click on, biographies, I'm starting to write some biographies, just sort of short little biographies about individuals, or in some cases families. So there are about 15 there, and then I think there's one there. And if we look at this one, this is actually to do with the Scicluna family of Mosta, who we've been talking about, and you'll find more information about the wider family and who they were and their various involvements with the bus industry. But the other thing you will find, if we go back a page, are the photographs. And at the moment, there are around about 200 photographs, all taken by Malta Police in the 60s and 70s of buses when they were brand new. And if I just sort of click on a few of these at random, let's that one's a more interesting one. So you can then click on each one and you'll see these were the official photographs taken from different angles. There's a side-on one there, and then there's a rear angle one there. And these were used by the police to make sure that owners hadn't either swapped vehicles or carried out rebuilds on vehicles without permission and things. So they were very much used as reference photos. And we're lucky that a lot of these survived. Not all of the ones taken survived, but luckily, there's about 300 photographs from around about 100 vehicles there to have a look at. And then just very, very quickly, the final section is Citizen Archivist. Now, you don't need to register to look at this, but if you want to interact in this section, you will need to register. But what we've got is, in this particular case, it's a photographic collection donated to the archives from the St Michael's Teacher Training College. And there's a whole host of images of people at the college. But in most cases, we've got no idea who the people are. So if we click through and, you've got, photograph like that one of presumably a whole group of teachers and bits and pieces. I presume they just won some sort of swimming cup by the looks of things. But we've got no idea who most of these people are. So what you can actually do in this section is if you register, you can then leave comments, and you can kind of sort of leave a cross somewhere on the photograph, and then leave a comment to say, this person, I don't know, this person was my father, Joe Borge, and he was at the college from this year to this year, or whatever. So that we can slowly start to sort of piece together information about who all these people are. And what we will then do is in future uploads, we'll upload photographs from other themes and other collections where, again, we're looking to try and identify places, identify people. Again, with the bus photos, we've got a number of photographs taken from the 30s upwards. And often you've got a bus driver or a conductor or several people stood with the bus, but we've got no idea who those people are. We could maybe take a guess from sort of known names, but we can't be sure. So again, there'll be this opportunity that people can leave information that helps to sort of fill in those gaps. So that, as I say, is just a very quick overview. What I suggest is, at your own leisure, go through these various sections, click through. What you will need to sometimes do is, if you click on a link and it doesn't look as though anything's happened, you may need to scroll down the screen because something's appeared, but it's off the bottom of the screen. It works on some computers and tablets better than others. But by all means, have a good look through that. And as I say, we're looking to upload new batches of information every 3 or 4 months, either more photographs and interviews to existing themes, or more themes that haven't been covered yet that we've got information for. So as I say, that's a very quick overview. Again, if anyone's got questions, we could probably sort of for 5 minutes just quickly do some questions, but otherwise I'll leave it there.